Hello, everyone, and welcome to Monday Night Travel with Rick Steves Europe. Tonight, we will celebrate Norway. My name is Ben Green, and I'll be your moderator. And now, I would like to welcome our travel guide, Rick Steves. Good evening, Rick.
Hey, Ben. Thank you so much. And I'm having a Norwegian evening, and it's so fun to invite all my traveling friends. Thank you for joining us. This is Monday Night Travel. And as you know, in normal times, I'd be spending 100 days a year in Europe doing our work, updating the guidebooks, leading tours, making TV shows. Hey, lately we haven't been able to do any of that. And in a normal time of year, when I am home, I'm running around the country giving talks, enthusing about European travel. Well, the only time I get to enthuse in public these days is Monday night. And that's thanks to you. Thanks for joining us. And we just had a wonderful trip to Norway in the last couple of hours, and we're going to do it again right now. And, you know, I want to remind you, this is Norway's Independence Day. We have our 4th of July. France has its July 14, Bastille Day, and Norway has Constitution Day. 200 years ago, a little more than that, Norway wrote a constitution that distinctly said we are not part of Denmark and we are not part of Sweden. We are Norwegians, and they are that to this day. My very first trip to Europe was in 1969. I was 14 years old, went to see the relatives in Norway. And this is sort of a nostalgic thing. I have not had a solo since I was a teenager in Norway, and I've been drinking it tonight. It's a soft drink. It's sort of like Fanta, but I think better. It's got a little of a special kick to it. And this was in 69, by far the #1 selling soft drink in Norway. Of course, now it's #2 to the Pepsi or Coke, but this really is a hit in Norway. And it reminds me how every country has its special little angles. And we're going to enjoy that today. We're joined by a friend of mine whose name is Pål Johansen. He's a guide from Oslo. It's about 3 o'clock in the morning right now in Oslo, and Pål is with us. And I want to thank you for joining us for Monday Night Travel. And I want to jump right into this. And we're going to, before I introduce to you Pål, we're going to see a video that Pål made for his YouTube channel. He's got a wonderful YouTube channel. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And Pål has put together this little introduction for us so that we can meet him in video before we meet him in person. So let me introduce to you Pål Johansen from Oslo.
Hi there, I'm Pål from Oslo, Norway. Hi there, I'm Pål from Oslo, Norway. My name is Pål. I'm a tour guide, but I'm also a sailor. Right now I'm up hanging from the top of the mast of my sailboat. And welcome to my channel, Norway with Pål. I grew up in Norway, and early on I developed a passion for boating and travel, here exploring volcanoes on a Spanish island. Since then, I've had many adventures in different parts of the world, here shaving my beard on an island in Nicaragua. The last years, however, I have been exploring Scandinavia, a region I find endlessly beautiful with many places to discover. You find a rich variety of food here, a lot of great art, an interesting history, and a modern progressive society. My hometown is Oslo, the capital of Norway. A city with an old history and that currently is undergoing a lot of redevelopment with new neighborhoods taking shape down by the Oslo fjord. I try to introduce you to Oslo through my eyes as a local. I love walking around, be it in the city, discovering great architecture and art, or out in the countryside, climbing mountains, heading on road trips, and looking for wildlife. I also love food and traditional Scandinavian cooking, and I teach you how to make local delicacies. And as often as I can, I head out to sail on my sailboat in the waters of Scandinavia, sailing to remote places, enjoying the wind and the waves in both sunny and stormy conditions. There's some heavy shit weather here, Doc. I hope you enjoyed this introduction. Subscribe to my YouTube channel and come experience Norway with Pål.
man, that makes me want to go to Norway. And Pål, you are joining us from Oslo, and I'll wave my Norwegian flag because it is a special day. And how are you feeling? What time is it? Is it like the sun rising or what?
Yeah, it's 4 in the morning, and daylight is actually coming out here now. But so it's been quite a day for me. I mean, I was celebrating, National Day most of the 17th. I slept for a few hours, and here I'm again celebrating.
Do it again.
So, double
Do it again
celebration
in another hemisphere. You're all dressed up really nice. You got your black coat on and your button, your ribbon there. What's going on?
Yeah, you always dress up. You put on your nicest clothes for the 17th of May. And usually wear a ribbon like this. You can see the royal emblem in here.
Yeah.
Always on the left-hand side, which is over your heart.
Nice.
And then a lot of Norwegians also put on their traditional costumes on the 17th of May, which is the bunad, which is this traditional dresses like this.
There we go. Yeah, the women have all their pewter buckles and the fancy embroidery. Oh, and the men too. Look at that.
Yeah.
And you see a lot of that. And I know my cousins, they wear their grandmother's bunad, and it just goes down from generation to generation.
Yeah, it's very typical to inherit the bunad of your grandparents.
Best I could do is a souvenir I bought on the fjords at the Dale. I think Dale is the company.
Dale.
Nice. Dale, yeah.
And
it's a great souvenir. Rick. Thank you.
You look great.
I'm doing my best. Well, I got my little Constitution Day Viking ship here. So that's your little pewter Viking ship, which is a nice souvenir when you're in Norway. Hey, Pål, in a nutshell, tell us, what is the importance of May 17 in Oslo? I mean, United States, we know about the 4th of July. The French know about Bastille Day. Why is everybody out with their flags and their pewter and their fancy outfits today in Oslo?
So May 17th is our Constitution Day. We signed our Constitution back in 1814 on the 17th of May. Mm-hmm. And this is one of the biggest National Day celebrations that you find in Europe. And what I especially like about this day is that it's actually a day for the children. Yeah. The children are in the center here. There are no military parades or anything like that.
Right.
So, they go in parades from the early morning. And grown-ups get together as well and have Syttende Mai frokost, 17th of May breakfast, and you have barbecues, and it's just a great day to hang out with family and
it's like a big
friends.
Family. 5 million Norwegians, one big family, and you and I are going to be eating and drinking Norwegian style here. Let's just give people a little sneak peek. I'll show you my food here. And Pål, you've got much better because you're in Norway, but in Seattle, I could come up with this. This is a carbonada. Open-faced sandwich is a big thing in Scandinavia. And the Norwegian hamburger is a carbonada, basically. And then I've got my goat cheese, which I'm a sucker for. I'm nostalgic for that. And what do you have there, Pål?
Yeah, so I have 3 open-faced sandwiches here. One with eggs and shrimp and some dill on the top. We use a lot of dill on seafood. And then there's one with roast beef and some fried onions and raw onions. Yeah. And then I have here one which has liver pate with some cucumbers on the top.
Now, when you go into a nice little cafe in Oslo, you see these laid out under glass, and this is the carbonada, and you've got between us, we got 4 different ones here, and these might be kind of expensive, but really it's a meal right there. That's a lunch, and you have that and your cup of coffee, and you're good to go. If you're just going to buy some street food, I go for the pulsa. This is my little skinny Norwegian wiener. Do you have one? There you go.
I have one as well.
And this one's wrapped in like a, flat, we know lefse, that's like a potato pancake in Norway.
Yeah.
So you have this lefse kind of patty, like a tortilla, right?
We call it, this one is similar to lefse, but we call it lumpe.
Okay. And it's just thinner, is that right? Or what's the
It's just thinner. It's thinner, but it's still like a potato.
Oh, okay, because I've got this is the finale of my evening today is going to be my lefse dessert. I've sprinkled some cinnamon on it, and this will take me right back to my grandma's kitchen. Oh, look at you.
This is a very traditional cake for the 17th of May, which we call bløtkake, which means soft cake, bløtkake.
Bløtkake. I remember that from my relatives. I would go I would starve myself in my vagabond days, and I'd go up to Norway and I'd extend my belly again. And it was all these different kakas. Kaka means cake, right?
Cake, yeah.
You got Napoleon kaka, krum kaka, Jule kaka. Give me a couple more kakas.
Pepperkake, gingerbread, for example.
Oh, there you go. And you got your blodkake right there.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to wash things down with a little bit of Norwegian firewater, akvavit.
I have some of the good stuff as well.
Aquavit. It must be that like water of life, aquavit.
Water of life, that's right.
Okay, this is 45% alcohol made with potato or some kind of grain distilled. And then what is it's got some kind of a caraway.
Caraway.
Yeah,
sometimes like caraway, and it's aged on oak sherry cask. So.
And it's good. It's good, Paul.
Yeah.
Teach me in Scandinavia, you guys are really serious about your etiquette when it comes to toasting. Tell us how to do it correctly, please.
It's very important to do a proper toast when you come to Scandinavia. If not, you might come across as a little bit rude, actually. So pay attention.
Okay.
So
you don't want Vikings to think you're rude. I mean, that's a pretty low bar.
So you raise your glass. And then an important thing is to make some eye contact.
Okay.
You don't stare, but just like a friendly glimpse, you know.
You must get tourists trying to be a little earnest about that.
Yeah, you can get a bit creepy if it's too much. Yeah.
Okay.
So you raise your glass and you smile, and the glimpse in the eyes, and then you say skål.
Skål.
And then you take a small sip. You raise your glass again, and you smile. And then you're done.
That is so Norwegian. I love it. And it's tasty, and it goes well with the food we're eating, and it's going to be part of the party. Hey, Paul, thank you so much for being with us. And we're going to jump right into our program. And normally every Monday night when we get together, I build a show from our program, which is called Classroom Europe. And people can go to ricksteves.com. And then this is our landing page. And if you want to, we've got our guides marketplace. We've got 100 guides like Paul in Europe right now that are waiting for COVID to get over. And they're doing all sorts of creative things. Most of it's free. And you can see what's going on there in our guides marketplace. You can find Paul in there. You've got all of our TV shows. Our tours are going to start selling in a couple of weeks. So get ready. We're ready to open the doors. Things are looking good. But I'm going right here to Classroom Europe. And this is a program we've designed for school teachers and homeschooling parents, but it's fun for anybody. It's free, it's fast, it's easy, there's no ads, and we can get here 500 different clips distilled out of our 150 different TV shows, and you can make your own playlist. And I'm going to do that right now for this celebration with Paul. I'm going to the left under countries, and I'm going to click Norway, and that'll get us 12 clips out of the shows we've made over the years. And when I look at this, I'm going to just kind of go through and click whatever might be interesting for us to share. I think Oslo's City Hall is always interesting. I want to add Bergen, that's Seattle's sister city, the capital, cultural capital over on the West Coast. We're going to learn about the Vikings because we got Paul here with us. Norway's natural wonders, I'll click that. Norwegian psyche, that's fascinating with the artists of Norway. And finally, we'll look at Norway's maritime heritage. So I've clicked 6 different videos. And right here, you see, we've got 6 videos and we've got 28 minutes. So that's what we've got now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to that playlist, and we see it here. Anybody can do this, by the way. I'm just demonstrating it because I'm pretty low tech, but I've been able to master this because every Monday I get to play with it. We're going to start with the Norway's maritime heritage there, but we've got 28 minutes of programming. You could do this when you're teaching or whatever. We're going to give this a title. We're going to call it Happy Birthday Norway. And I'm just going to save that. You could put notes to your students or your travel mates or whatever, but I'm just going to save it. And anybody, it's a free, fun service. You can have your own archive. I've got mine just like anybody else. And right there, we've got Happy Birthday Norway. So we've got plenty of time now to get into that with our friend Paul, our guide. And I want to thank you for joining us. And Paul, we're going to right now go to Norway, and I'm going to be hitting the pause button every few minutes, and we're going to talk about what we're going to enjoy. So let's travel together right now, thanks to Monday Night Travel. Oslo's harborfront provides an inviting place to simply enjoy the urban scene between sightseeing stops.
From here, a ferry shuttles visitors across the harbor to Bygdøy, a peninsula with several museums highlighting the nation's maritime history. The Viking Ship Museum shows off 9th century Viking ships, icons from those days of pillage and plunder. Norwegian marauders terrorized Europe for generations. Gazing up at the prow of one of these sleek vessels, you can imagine the horror peasants in France or England or Russia felt when those redheads on the rampage sailed up their river.
So, Paul, I'm 2 generations removed. My grandparents came over from Norway and homesteaded up in Canada and eventually ended up down here in Seattle. But you're a Norwegian boy whose family's been there for eons. When you look at a Viking ship, what does it make you feel? What do you think of? And what's with this sort of a legend that the Vikings had such an impact on Europe in France and in England for generations? When they finished their prayer, they didn't just say amen. They said, and deliver us from the Norsemen. Amen. I mean, the Norwegian marauders had quite an impact. But I don't know. What's your take on that from a Norwegian perspective?
Well, I would just want to say I actually done some genealogy, and I've gone back in my family tree, and I found out that I'm related to Harold the Ruthless, or Harold Haraldsson, who tried to invade England. He's my 27th great grandfather. So, you know, when I go into the Viking Ship Museum and I see these ships, I'm just amazed. I'm just impressed, thinking, you know, about the journeys that they undertook. And of course, you need some brave men to do this, but they also had some pretty good ships. They had, you know, some of the best shipbuilding technology at that time, which made these ships capable of crossing oceans. So I'm always very impressed when I see the ships. And of course, the Vikings, they don't have the best reputation in the rest of the world, but always on my tours, I always try to broaden the perspective a bit of my tour members, because I mean, the Vikings were not just savages. They were also, you know, traders. They were family men. They were farmers, great engineers as well. But you have to remember that it was the Vikings didn't write the history themselves at that time. You know, it was sort of their enemies, or the ones that they attacked, monks, for example, that wrote down that history.
Yeah, and it was their enemies, or their victims, or their people that they opposed were probably more literate than they were, so they got to write the stories. And so that's an important thing to remember. And when we do travel around, we go to the museums and we see the artifacts that came with these ships. And it's astounding how advanced the Vikings were in the year 800 or 900. If you want to see the Viking ships, by the way, very good museum in Denmark, 2 hours away from Copenhagen at Roskilde. And I think the one we're in right now in Oslo is excellent. So let's carry on with that. Over 1,000 years ago, 3 things drove Vikings on their far-flung raids: hard economic times in their bleak homeland, the lure of prosperous and vulnerable communities to the south, and a mastery of the sea.
In a boat like this, finely crafted of oak, the Vikings ranged far and wide. They settled over 1,000 miles away in the west of France, which became Normandy, named for those Norsemen. And they hopscotched across the Atlantic, from Iceland to Greenland and on to the east coast of Canada, which they called Vinland. Imagine 30 men hauling on long oars, muscling through the sea for weeks and months on end. In 1892, a replica of this ship sailed to America in 44 days to celebrate the 400th anniversary of Columbus not discovering America.
Ooh, touche. Columbus not discovering America. Hey, Paul, when Norwegians think of Columbus, just in one sentence or so, what would they say?
Well, we tend to say that he used a Viking map.
And as the time goes by, it becomes more and more clear the Vikings were there 500 years before Columbus ever knew there was an America.
This ship, with its well-designed rudder and intricate carving, was probably a ceremonial pleasure craft for royalty to promenade on calm waters. Viking chieftains were buried in their ships with their possessions. In fact, that's why these particular ships survived. Excavations turned up artifacts of leather and finely carved wood, like these ornate sleighs. This horse cart is decorated with fanciful scenes from old Viking sagas. An adjacent museum houses another Norwegian ship, the Fram. 1,000 years after the Vikings, the steam and sail-powered Fram took modern-day explorers Amundsen and Nansen deep into both polar regions. This tough ship ventured both farther north and south than any ship had gone before. Exhibits help you imagine life in these extremes, so far from the safety and comforts of civilization. For 3 years, this boat, especially designed to survive the pressure of a frozen sea, was locked in the grip of the Arctic ice. The Fram was well equipped with instruments for scientific research. State-of-the-art in the early 1900s, these tools enabled the explorers to bring back important new data from the polar frontiers. Next to the Fram is another example of Norway's seafaring heritage, the Kon-Tiki. In 1947, the Norwegian explorer Thor Heyerdahl and his crew constructed the Kon-Tiki raft out of bamboo and balsa wood. They set sail from Peru on the crude and fragile craft, surviving for 101 days on fish, coconuts, and sweet potatoes. About 4,300 miles later, they landed in Polynesia.
The point of this expedition was to show that early South Americans could have settled Polynesia. While Heyerdahl proved they could have, anthropologists doubt they actually did. So, Pål.
Oslo.
Pål, before we leave the boats, I know you love your sailboat. You've lived in it for a while, I understand. And my son, Andy, had an amazing week with you sailing up the Oslo fjord. I just was so jealous. You know, Norway, 5 million people. You guys are like the household word for Arctic exploration and getting to the South Pole and the North Pole and so on. What is it about the Norwegian explorer that lets a relatively small nationality like Norway be such, to punch so far above its weight?
I know that guy behind you, by the way.
Andy. Yeah.
Happy
Hey.
holiday.
You stuck.
You guys were on a week on the boat. That was great.
Yeah, we were. Great shirt, by the way. Yeah.
Happy sailing.
Good to see you.
Andy just flew in from Colombia last night, so he's back home now.
My first COVID shot.
Good for you.
Oh,
Andy.
that's good. That's good. Good to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, what is it about you Vikings today, 2,000 years later?
Well, I think it's part of the sort of the Norwegian spirit, wanting to go out and explore, to look out instead of looking in. Mm-hmm. And I think perhaps this is a legacy that the Vikings left, and that so many explorers in Norway have been influenced by on a later point, like Fridtjof Nansen. You had Roald Amundsen, first man to the South Pole. You have Thor Heyerdahl here with his incredible journeys, and many other Norwegians as well.
And when you think about it, it's like 1892. Okay, these Norwegians decided to sail a Viking ship to America 500 years after Columbus. Great. 1947, Thor Heyerdahl makes a balsa wood boat and he sails from South America over to Polynesia. Wow. I mean, it's just, that was there's so much of that reaching out and embracing the world. It's quite an inspiration. Okay, let's carry on with our adventure around Norway.
Striking City Hall faces the harbor. It was finished in 1950 to celebrate the city's 900th birthday. The art, which shows everyone working together, implies a classless society. Inside, the Grand Hall is famous for hosting the Nobel Peace Prize ceremony. This main hall feels like a temple. The altar-like mural celebrates family values, good citizenship, and civic administration. The mural shows both townfolk and countryfolk, people from all classes and all walks of life. Together, despite differences, they're collaborating with a determination to build a better society.
This to me is very inspirational. The Scandinavians are famous for not having very good church attendance, but when you go to a main square anywhere in Scandinavia, in the capital city anyways, it seems that the city hall stands there like a church, proudly proclaiming that people can take care of their neighbors and work together in a beautiful way. It seems like it sets the bar high and it inspires people. What is it like a civic religion or something, Paul? But what is it in Scandinavia that it clearly distinguishes itself from the rest of Europe?
Yeah, well, I think the city hall for us is kind of a space where, you know, people's beliefs are depicted and celebrated. Mm-hmm. And it's a very open and accessible place for us as well. So like sometimes when I'm downtown in Oslo and let's say I have 30 minutes or an hour spare time over, I would just pop by the city hall, you know, just go inside and spend some time. And it's just a great place to hang out.
Because Paul, if I think about all of my travels in Norway, I mean, in Europe, I've been everywhere in Europe for years, you know, I intimately know the city hall in Copenhagen, Stockholm, and Oslo. Those are the three greatest city halls in Europe. It's no coincidence. They're all in Scandinavia. They're all free. They've all got wonderful, generous tours. They just really are a beautiful insight into the passions and the style of the communities in Scandinavia, which happen to be in the history, the heritage. Yeah. And it just happens to celebrate a way of organizing society that creates the most content people on the planet by most estimates. Mm. It's amazing. We used to go with our tours and we'd come to City Hall in Oslo and I'd invite my cousin and we would just meet her at the City Hall. We'd sit at a table, no problem at all. My group was at the table and we just have a Q&A, talk to my cousin about what is it like in Norway. And right now, we'll just go through a little more of the City Hall here and see some of these murals and what they mean for the Norwegian society.
This fresco celebrates national unity. From the fishing nets of the west coast to the dense forests of the east, it takes you on a voyage through the collective psyche of Norway, from its simple rural beginnings into the industrial age. And this mural tells the story of Norway's darkest period, German occupation during World War II.
I got to say, my uncle Tor walked me along this mural and he looked at every little scene and narrated it as if he lived it because he had. And to do
I think the best place in Norway to explain the Second World War is straight in front of that mural.
This mural. Because I was just so moved. It was so emotional, so from my uncle's heart.
Bombs fall, and the country is overwhelmed by Nazi troops. The Gestapo breaks into homes. They target Norway's culture. Underground resistant fighters plot heroic acts of sabotage. Finally, Germany is defeated. Prisoners are freed, and Norwegians can once again wave their flag. During that long occupation, the Nazis controlled Akershus Fortress. Today, that same fortress houses the Norwegian Resistance Museum, which tells the story of Norway's World War II experience. Germany, with the invasion already a fait accompli, gave Norway an ultimatum to capitulate. The king said no, eventually escaping the country to command the Norwegian resistance from London.
At the start of World War II, a flurry of countries, including Norway, fell to Germany. Norway spent 5 years under Nazi occupation. A Norwegian trader named Quisling was installed as the country's leader and ruled as a Nazi puppet. To this day, his name, Quisling, means someone who betrays their country.
Germany attempted to make Norway Nazi. Propaganda posters encouraged people to join the local Nazi party and enlist with the German army to fight the Soviets on the Eastern Front. With 350,000 occupying Nazi troops to feed and house, World War II was an austere time for locals. Foraging and rationing were a way of life. From the start, there was an organized resistance, and the king maintained a government in exile in London. Communication was critical. While the Germans outlawed radios, people found creative ways to stay tuned in. Clandestine radio operators hid out in mountain huts as Nazis with direction finders tracked them down. Underground newspapers spread messages from the king, boosted morale, and inspired action. A thrilling example of Norwegian resistance was the sabotage of the heavy water factory high in Norway's mountains. Heavy water was a key to Germany's plan to build an atomic bomb. A small band of Norwegians skied over 200 miles in from Sweden, managed to blow up the plant, dealing Hitler a major setback. Toward the end of the war, resistance activity crescendoed. A thriving underground industry cranked out a crude arsenal of homemade weapons. Communiques were hidden in loaves of bread, heels of shoes, and tins of Spam. A home force of 40,000 troops was outfitted by airdrops. Finally, in May of 1945, the heroic soldiers of the Norwegian resistance were greeted by a grateful public. Outside the fortress, a statue of FDR is a memorial thanking the USA for providing Norway's support and its royal family a refuge through the war.
Wow, Paul, that's pretty heavy history.
Yeah,
right
it is.
there.
Yeah.
Sweden has no Nazi resistance museum, does it?
No, they don't.
Sweden stayed neutral.
Yeah, they stayed neutral throughout the war.
Denmark has a resistance museum.
Yes, they do.
It burned down. Did they rebuild it and open it? Do you remember?
As far as I know, yeah, they did reopen it. Yeah,
that's good. And of course, Oslo has one right there in Akershus Castle, which is right downtown, and you got to check it out when you're there. Paul, what was your family's experience in World War II?
So I had actually my grandfather. He's one on the photo there behind me, and he's sitting in his parade uniform. He was in the King's Guard, but this was in 1938, so it's just before the war broke out. But after he died, my grandmother let me go through a lot of his things, and on the bottom of one of his boxes, I found this little red card. And that was actually a membership card showing that he was a member of the resistance during the Second World War, which he never spoke of. He never said anything about it. He never talked much about the war at all. It was never something that, came up at family reunions or gatherings. And I think that's very typical for the Norwegians who went through the war, is that when the war was over, the war was over. Yeah. And they just wanted to go on with their lives and don't look back.
Is that because just by the nature of human nature, and when you're occupied by people who are much more powerful than you, some people can be heroes, but not everybody can be heroes. And you don't want a divided society in the difficult years after a war. You want to all be together. So it's better just not to talk about that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think any war, any occupation is a trauma for the population. And it hurts to talk about it. So that's why you don't talk about it. But in the long term, that's not a good idea, because there are a lot of issues, that happened during the war that needs some attention, that needs to be talked about by the public.
Yeah. To this day, I imagine there's some scars from that war. I mean, all over Europe, you've got, in Spain, were you with Franco or were you against Franco? In Italy, you got Mussolini. In Norway, you got the Quisling. And a lot of people probably just said, well, let's just keep our head low and not get to put in work camp, and we'll just go along with it.
Yeah, to give you an example, for example, after the war, a lot of the Norwegian women who had been with Nazi soldiers, they were not treated very fairly. They were mistreated, to say so. And it wasn't until it was 2 or 3 years ago that our prime minister went out and gave them a formal apology.
70 years after the war, finally, It was like, you're part of our community, you're part of the family. So let's just get over that. Wow. Hey, one thing we can talk about with no stress at all is our food. How are you doing with your meal? I've just been enjoying my carbonada. This carbonada is really good. It's like, can you say it's like the Norwegian hamburger or something?
Yeah, I would say so. And it's on a leaf of salad, and it looks very good.
It's sort of an elegant hamburger on a nice piece of bread, and with all these little beautiful, colorful toppings. What else do you have? You got your wiener there, your pulse.
I'm going to start with my wiener now, and I'm going to eat it very Norwegian style.
I understand I'm doing it Danish. To dip my weenie into the mustard is not very Norwegian.
No, and then I'm going to dip it into
style. I'm going to dip it into the crinkly onions, right?
Fried onions, yeah.
And I'm just going to try it here.
What we do in Norway, which is quite typical here is to put some shrimp salad on the hot dog.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it actually goes very well together with hot dogs. So you just put it inside the lumpe and the hot dog.
Oh, it's nice.
And you just wrap it up like this.
Oh, all I got is a pig in a blanket.
And
okay, bon appetit. How do you say bon appetit in Norway?
you can say just vær så god or velbekomme.
Vær så god. See, that's a memory for me. And then I would always, I learned how to say takk for maten.
Thanks for the food. Yeah.
Takk for pølse.
Yeah. Vær så god. Velbekomme.
Takk for krumkaka. Oh, this guy.
Very good.
I never had it with a little left wrapper there. I've always had it with a little hot dog bun.
I
But
think we need to take another toast, Rick.
I think this is very important.
Skål.
Scroll, my friend. And I'm thankful that I'm going to wave this Norwegian flag for every country that has independence. And in hopes that people that don't, who are unable to wave their flag, can soon wave their flag. Norway has been very courageous and bold in winning that opportunity. Okay. Hey, I could talk all day with you, Paul. I got to say, do you miss doing our tours?
I miss it a lot. You know, I'm all the time like fantasizing how's the first tour going to be that I do again.
My son Andy just walked up. You know, he's a great guide and he loves it. I'm getting a chance to talk with you right now. I just was looking through our booklet here. You know, this is our tour catalog from 2020 where we didn't do any tours, but we're going to do them all in 2021 or 2022, I mean. But Paul, look at that itinerary there. There's the itinerary that you do.
Yeah.
If I know what a tour guide is like, you look at that itinerary and it's filled with challenge and celebration and reward and
a lot of good memories, and I met so many nice people, nice tour members on my tours.
Yeah, well, God willing, we're going to be doing tours again early in 2022, and we're about ready to open the gates. We've got 20,000 people's names on tours for next year, and we haven't been confident enough to open the door, but we are there. I think if everybody gets their vaccinations, you saw Andy, he just flew in from Colombia in South America today. First thing he did was get his shot. I've got both of my shots. My staff is pretty much completely vaccinated. We're going to all get on this boat and we're going to sail, baby. Yep. And that means we're going to be traveling again soon. And we're going to be going all over Europe. And let's carry on with our tour with Pål Johansen here from Norway.
In this distant corner of Europe, many visitors find more high culture than they expect. Norway's National Gallery showcases the powerful beauty of this country's landscape and people as portrayed by its great painters. A thoughtful visit here gives those heading into the mountains and fjord country a chance to pack along a little better understanding of Norway's cultural soul. Landscapes have always played an important role in Norwegian art. This genre peaked in the late 19th century during the Romantic period, which stressed the power and beauty of nature. Stalheim by Johan Christian Dahl epitomizes the Norwegian closeness to nature. Romantics reveled in the power of the great outdoors. The rainbow says it all. This is God's work. Nature is big. God is great. Man is small. The birch tree, standing boldly front and center, is a standard symbol for the politically downtrodden Norwegian people, battered yet still standing.
I have to mention, and I have to mention it very strongly, if you're interested in the culture and the folk life and the heritage of all these beautiful nations, whether it's Estonia or Portugal or Scotland or Norway or Finland or Czech Republic, you name it, go to the National Gallery in the capital and see the romantic art from the late 1800s. That's when countries were establishing that they are Norwegians, they're not Danes. They are Bulgarians, they're not Ottomans. They are Estonians, they're not Russians. And you see that in their embrace of nature. Do that in the capital city. And then when you go into and do it with a guide or with a little extra energy to buy the book and read about it, so that when you go into the countryside, these images will come back to you as you celebrate the nature yourself.
In the mid-19th century, Norwegians were awakening to their national identity. The Bridal Voyage shows the ultimate Norwegian scene. A wedding party with everyone decked out in their traditional dress, heading for the stave church, engulfed in the majesty of the fjords. Here and throughout Europe, nationalism and romanticism went hand in hand. These were hardworking, independent folk. People were poor, but they owned their own land. Paintings like these were patriotic tools. This painting, Low Church Devotion by Tiedemann from 1848, shows a dissenting Lutheran church group, of which there were many in the 19th century. Rather than accept the Norwegian king's high church, they worshipped independently, in a humble home. The light of God powers through the chimney, illuminating salt-of-the-earth people with strong faiths. Later, many of these same people emigrated to America for greater religious freedom. Edvard Munch is Norway's most famous and influential painter. In this 1895 self-portrait, we see a complex and troubled artist. Munch helped pioneer a new style, expressionism, using lurid colors and bold lines to express inner turmoil and the angst of the modern world. The Scream is Munch's most iconic work. The figure seems isolated from the people on the bridge, locked up in himself, unable to stifle his scream. Munch wrote, "This painting is the work of a madman." This expressionist masterpiece is a breakthrough painting showing angst personified.
Munch suffered from depression. His father had a mental breakdown. His mother and his sister died of TB. When he eventually overcame his depression, he became a happier man, but he never again painted with such power.
But today, especially when the sun shines in Oslo, it's really not that bad. Wherever I travel, I like to think of public transportation routes as potential tour routes. Oslo's main tram line circles around the city. You can hop on and off knowing another is always on its way.
Oh, it just reminded me the job we have ahead of us, and Paul's going to help us in Oslo. As soon as we're able to travel again, and as soon as Europe is back to some kind of normalcy from a tourism point of view, we've got 50 guidebooks to update, and we're going to go back to every place in Europe. It's going to be all hands on deck. It's probably going to be early 2022 when we do this, and we're going to make sure each of these details is still accurate, and we're going to sweep away anything that's no longer standing after this difficult COVID time. I would think a lot of small mom and pops and entrepreneurial ventures and little tiny shops will not be there after COVID, but I hope and pray that most of Europe will still be there, and that we all have a determination to consume in a way that we can shape our future and have a world that has a lot of small businesses rather than a few big box stores. But one thing I love to do in our books, this is our Scandinavia book, which is all of this information is in, by the way, is to find public transit routes like this tram car number 12 that goes around the city. And you got your one-day pass, you can hop on and hop off, and it laces together so many great sites, and you can do that on your own. Hey, Paul, just a quick question. After COVID, how many of the cute little places in Balestrand and in Aeroscoping and in Kalmar and so on, do you think will still be surviving after COVID? I know Scandinavia, like our country, is helping businesses get through this. Do you think there'll be a wholesale clearing out of the small businesses, or will they still be there in 2022?
To be honest, they've been hit pretty hard, but I think a lot of them will still be here. And because of two reasons. One reason is that they've gotten a lot of help, economic help from the government. Mm-hmm. And the other reason is that a lot of Norwegians are traveling now to discover their own country. Instead of going to Spain during the summer, you go up in the fjords.
Okay.
So some hotels are even making more money than they did before.
No, that's good. But we're coming back. The tourists are coming back. So you stay
You're
in
welcome.
business.
You're welcome.
That's good.
Trams come by about every 10 minutes, efficiently and economically lacing together many of the city's most important sites. Oslo's vast Frogner Park is a perfect place to share a moment with Norwegian families at play. Strolling here, you feel a positive spirit, both rugged and pragmatic, celebrating life. The park showcases a lifetime of work by Oslo's greatest sculptor, Gustav Vigeland.
In 1921, Vigeland made a deal with the city.
In return for a great studio and financial support, he agreed to dedicate his creative life to beautifying Oslo with all these statues, which became this much-loved sculpture garden. From 1924 to 1943, he created a world of bronze and granite statues comprising 600 figures, each nude and unique. Vigeland's sturdy humans capture universal themes of the cycle of life. Today, Vigeland's Park is beloved by the people of Oslo. It's both a place to relax and a place to be inspired. 6 giants hold a fountain, symbolically toiling with the burden of life, as water, the source of life, cascades steadily over them. In clumps of bronze trees, Vigeland takes us through the seasons of life. The centerpiece of the park, a teeming monolith of life surrounded by granite groups, continues Vigeland's cycle of life motif. Vigeland explores a lifetime of human relationships in earthbound groups. The figures seem irresistible as visitors playfully engage with the art. Then at the center, a tangle of figures carved out of a single block of stone rockets skyward. Built of bodies, it seems to pick up speed as it spirals up. Vigeland left the meaning of his monolith open. Like life itself, it's a wonderful puzzle.
Wow. Paul, you're a lucky guy to live in Oslo with a massive park like this right behind the palace.
Yeah,
what does that park mean to you?
It means quite a lot. I mean, as a local, I go there pretty much all the time to watch the beautiful art, of course, but also just to hang out. It's it's a big area, and you can barbecue or you can do sports, and then you can stroll and look at some sculptures, and I'm always very touched when I come to this park, because it's such a beautiful tribute to humanity, I think.
That's so interesting you say that, because I keep thinking back, this COVID time it's the first time in 30 years or more that I haven't traveled, and I've had a chance to think back on my early trips and the impact they had on me. I was in this park when I was just a little tyke, 14 years old. My parents were very, they were just humble Seattleites, hardworking piano tuner, went to Europe to see the piano factories in Germany and the relatives in Norway. And my parents took me, and it was a great expense for them to take me, and it compromised what they could do for their first trip to Europe, And I was in this park with them. And I remember when I was a little 14-year-old, I was looking up at them, and they were loving me in this very, very generous way. Like, it just didn't make any sense how much they loved me and how much they worked to just give me this experience, how much they sacrificed. And then I looked out over this park, Vigeland Park, Frogner Park, what we're looking at right here, filled with work by Gustav Vigeland. And I saw the park was filled with other parents loving their children as much as my parents loved me. And I remember that was one of those eureka moments where it occurred to me, this world is home to billions of equally precious little kids like me. And not just, my parents and me, but it was just humanity. And the park kind of does that. It brings people together. It lets you think about the stages of life. It lets you think about your community, your neighbors. I think Vigeland had something figured out there for us to share 100 years later.
Yeah, he certainly did. He never gave many explanations, actually, to his sculptures. He wanted people to see them and feel something and interpret it for themselves.
It's a beautiful thing. It's such a beautiful thing. And I hope when people go to Norway, I would never allow one of our tourists to go to Norway without visiting the
must see.
We must see, absolutely.
Bergen is Norway's second city after Oslo. Situated just one sheltering island from the open sea, it's long provided ships a safe port of call. It's a busy working port. It's popular with cruise ships and an essential refuge when heavy winds drive in the boats that serve the North Sea oil rigs. Much of Norway's current affluence is fueled by the oil it drills just offshore. Visitors enjoy charming cobbled streets which surround the harbor and climb the encircling hills. Bergen's popular funicular rises high above the city, offering commanding views. Surveying the surrounding islands and fjords, it's clear why this city is known as the gateway to fjord country. Back down at the harbor, the bustling fish market has become a food circus of eateries selling fishy treats to tourists. Eager merchants provide tasty samples, and they'll happily assemble a plate to order. This fine harbor has a long history. 700 years ago, local kings established Bergen as Norway's first capital. The 13th century Hakon's Hall was part of the royal residence. In a city built of wood, stone buildings represented power. As in many Norwegian sites, the included tour here brings meaning to an otherwise hard-to-appreciate attraction.
And I do have to stress that right now, if I could interrupt. When you go to Norway, a lot of the buildings, they're historic, but they feel just kind of stark and empty. But they become alive when you take advantage of the young guide or young or old guide that's there, who is in his work is to help tourists understand what they're looking at. Take full advantage of that. The admissions are expensive, but when you think that it comes with a guided tour, even if it's just you alone, this guy is there to help out. Paul, do you remember in Bergen, there's the leprosy museum, Hansen's hospital? I mean, this is Dr. Hansen, the guy that pioneered the whole understanding of leprosy. His hospital, it's interesting in itself, but you pay to go in and you get a guided tour, just you and your partner, because there's people, docents, standing by to help out.
Welcome to the Håkonshall, which is today one of the more important secular buildings we actually have here in Norway from the Middle Ages. You're now standing up, as you can see, in the main hall, and I think this is also the best location where you're able to appreciate actually how large this building is. And today, it is by far the largest secular stone building in Norway from the Middle Ages.
The adjacent tower dates back to the same period. Its simple design favored security over comfort. It was basically 4 stout rooms stacked atop each other. This was the chapel. From the roof, we enjoy a royal view.
So for centuries, this actually happened to be the tallest building in Bergen. And what I think the building is trying to represent today is the attempt the Norwegian kings made in the 1200s to make this a political center.
Colorful wooden warehouses mark Bergen's touristy historic quarter. Since the 1300s, this was its old German trading center called Bergen, or the Wharf. Along with being home of Norway's king, Bergen was a member of the mighty Hanseatic League, and therefore a trading power. The Hanseatic League was an alliance of cities stretching across Northern Europe from London to Russia. They worked together for freer, safer, and more profitable trade in an age before modern states could provide a reliable environment for business. German merchants basically ran Bergen's trade for 400 years. In the 1500s, Bergen was essentially a Germanic community of 2,000 workaholic merchants surrounded and supported by 5,000 Norwegians.
This is where my producer Simon gets a little nervous because I'm hell-bent on describing the Hanseatic League here in Bergen. And it's not good TV because people's eyes glaze over. But, you know, if you have the attention span to understand this, a little bit of understanding about Bergen really helps you get more out of your sightseeing. Paul, what is it about the people of Bergen? There's something special about Bergen that Oslo doesn't even have.
Well, you know, Bergen for hundreds of years was the biggest port town in Norway because of all the, you know, the dry cod being exported out. Mm-hmm. So there was a large influx of sailors that came to Bergen. So Bergen ended up getting a lot of influence from Europe. Became a very cosmopolitan city. Very different from the rest of Norway in many ways, and that is very much present today also. And people from Bergen, now we call them for Bergenser, and they have a very a particular personality. They're kind of a bit more social than the average Norwegian. They talk more, they talk louder as well, and they're also very proud of Bergen.
Are they more cosmopolitan?
Perhaps you could say that, yeah. I think that's a good description.
500 years ago, they were connected because Europe was hungry. I mean, it was basically Europe was hungry. You don't have refrigeration. What do you have? You got salted cod. To this day, cod from Norway is the staple in Portugal. We'll check that out in just a minute. I'm going to be holding up a piece of salted cod here. It feels like a baseball bat. It's amazing. You can stack the bottom of your ship with these things and soak them in water and feed your crew for months.
The Hanseatic Museum stands on the edge of the wharf. With creaky wooden interiors and maritime hardware, it helps you envision the economy that made Bergen. It was all about this fish, cod, a form of protein that could be dried, preserved, and shipped anywhere. Bergen is the place where cod from the north met traders from the rest of Europe. The Norwegians were the good fishermen. The Germans were the good merchants. They needed each other, and Bergen is where they met. Rooms upstairs with 100-year-old cod hanging from the ceilings take you back to the 1700s. It was an all-male society with strict rules and a focus on business. Because of the ever-present danger of fire, it was generally cold and dark. People slept cozy as they could in cramped cupboard beds. While there was hardly room for company, this bunk came with a pinup girl. Bergen's wooden core is made of long rows of planky warehouses leaning haphazardly across narrow alleys. It's burned down and been rebuilt several times, and it's now touristy and full of shops and galleries. Still, strolling here, you can appreciate the heritage.
And Bergen is the jumping off point for lots of great natural wonders of the west coast of Norway. Personally, I'd say without going up to the far north, you can enjoy the far west of Norway and get more nature action per every day and mile than you could by going up to the far north. The far west of Norway, which we're going to see now, is very rewarding.
Norway is long and skinny. It stretches nearly the length of America's west coast.
So if you put a pin in the map in Oslo down on the bottom, and you swung Norway around, this tall, skinny country with just 5 million people, the top of Norway would go as far south as Rome. I mean, it's amazing how long Norway is and how fascinating it is to get out to that west coast. Don't just go to Oslo, you got to go to the west coast.
We'll zero in on the scenic west, along the biggest of the fjords, Sognefjord, with stops in Jotunheim, the Jostedal Glacier, Solvorn, Flam, Balestrand, and Bergen.
And Paul, when I look at this map, I think that 80% of the tourists, they're going to be in Oslo, and they'll take the 24-hour Norway in a nutshell trip from Oslo to Bergen, with a trip down to Flam and a cruise on the fjords as part of the ferry system. And it's beautiful, and it's the best 24 hours you could have outside of Oslo, I would say. But if you have a couple of days in a rental car, you can do a lot more, can't you?
Yeah, if you have a rental car, you can drive up a little bit further north and go over that area where you see it says Jotunheimen, the home of the giants, which is a large mountain plateau. So you can drive over there, and you can even spend a night or two up there in like an old hotel. Like a lot of old farms, mountain farms, have been converted into hotels. So that's something I could really recommend someone to do if they have a car.
I stayed in a place called Roisheim, and I think the king actually stays in Roisheim. And it's one of these mountain hamlets with thatched roofs and goats standing on the roof eating the grass on the roof, and beautiful food and so much heritage. And it was a beautiful opportunity. It was intense Norwegian countryside. Paul, you taught me so well. Let's do a little skål here. Here, skål.
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 I'm loving this trip around Norway, I gotta say, and it's so nice to have you here. Let's go traveling around the west of Norway now.
This is Jotunheim, home of the giants. It's a high plateau that feels like it's the top of the world. These are Northern Europe's highest peaks, and they're steeped in Norse legends and folklore. This is the land of Thor and Odin, whose spirits still inhabit the misty peaks. For centuries, villagers trekked across this pass to reach the coast. It was an arduous journey, but today, crossing it's a pleasure.
Now, I got to remind people, driving is dangerous in Norway. It's dangerous because it's so darn scenic. Norway is very sparsely populated. The roads are like 1.5 lanes wide, and it doesn't really matter because you rarely encounter any sort of a traffic jam. But it's hard to keep your eye on the road because everything is so scenic. So make an agreement with everybody on the car. We will just stop the car and get out and enjoy the scenery so I can keep my eyes on the road when I'm driving. Otherwise, it is dangerous.
At 4,600 feet, the Sognefjell Road is Norway's highest pass.
There it is, 1.5 lanes. I mean, it's just a 1-lane road. And if a car comes, you pull out. In the foreground, you see the little pull out there.
At this latitude, even these modest altitudes take us high above the tree line, with snow through the summer. Norway's lunar-like mountainscapes and deep fjords were shaped by glaciers that covered most of the continent 10,000 years ago. Europe's largest surviving glacier, Jostedal, is still hard at work. It covers 180 square miles and, though shrinking, is still mighty. Of the many tongues of the glacier, this one, called Nigardsbreen, offers the best visit. The valley comes with a quintessential glacier view. The approach includes a cruise across the glacial lake. The scale is enormous, and blue cliffs of ancient ice dwarf awestruck visitors. Park guides lash on crampons and rope up adventurous travelers in preparation for an icy hike. While there are more demanding Nigardsbreen routes, I'm joining a family hike, just an hour, but offering an unforgettable experience and bringing you face to face with the power and majesty of nature. While tentative at first, hikers soon gain confidence with their crampons as they climb high onto the glacier. 75 years ago, this glacier filled most of this valley. Guides teach a respect for nature, and any visit heightens one's awareness of the impact of climate change. Rivers of ice, like this, carved huge valleys, creating the defining feature of Norway's landscape, the fjords. Those glaciers, as much as a mile thick, spent eons carving up western Norway as they worked their way to the sea. Slowly, they gouged U-shaped valleys that later filled with water. The distance from seabed to mountaintop around here is as much as 9,000 feet, nearly 2 vertical miles. Dramatic waterfalls continue to cut into the mountains. This viewpoint makes sure car hikers get out and appreciate the view. Sognefjord is Norway's biggest, and that's the one we're exploring.
So there you see at the head of this fjord, that's a little town called Flam, F-L-A-M. And then in the foreground, the little town there is called Aurland, and that's the name of the fjord, Aurland's Fjord. And you see the ferry coming in. And when I was talking about that Norway in a nutshell day, that train goes from Oslo to Bergen, and it stops at a ski resort up on top of the mountain where you can get out of the train, and then all the tourists will take the Norway in a nutshell roundabout way, and they'll take a cogwheel train down to Flam from where a ferry picks you up, and it's coordinated with the arrival of the train. It's really cool. And you'll go up that fjord and down the next fjord, the narrow fjord, to Gudvangen, from where a bus is waiting to take you back to the train where you finish off into Bergen. It's a beautifully coordinated, wonderfully designed by the Norwegian tourism industry. Look at the very best of Norwegian fjord country, and you're going to see that in the next few images here.
Of its many arms, the most scenic is called Nærøy Fjord. Rain or shine, traditional ferries offer a relaxing yet thrilling fjord experience. These ferries, while popular with tourists, are the lifeline of many fjordside communities. Some remote farms are connected to the outside world only by ferry. Mail is dropped and visitors come and go by request. And the visual highlight of this ride, Nærøy Fjord, is 10 miles long and breathtakingly narrow, as little as 800 feet wide.
God, it's gorgeous. Paul, can you hardly contain yourself?
Yeah, no, I mean, I never tire of going on the Nærøy Fjord. It's just stunningly beautiful, beautiful. And
one of the very curious things to me, I've written 50 guidebooks, and they're the best-selling guidebooks in every country in Europe. This Scandinavia book, which is a labor of love for me because of my Scandinavian heritage, is probably my worst-selling guidebook. It is just a small market. It shouldn't be a small market, but it is, and it's just an undiscovered gem in Europe. You know, there's potential, there's capacity. It makes sense. If you travel smartly, it's not that much more expensive than Germany or England, and people just don't understand that. But you're getting a little dose of Scandinavia here, and I'm just ranting here because I work really hard on this book, and it should sell better. Not because I want to make more royalties. I want more people to experience this, because this is what you get. Rain or shine, you get life-changing beauty. Wow. It is
breathtaking.
I just got to say, it is so nice. And Paul, I don't know about you, but can Norway handle a few more tourists if we all want to come?
Yeah, we can. It's, I mean, I think one thing that's great about traveling in Norway is that wherever you go, you kind of feel that you're away from the crowds. You don't get the huge crowds that you get in Southern Europe, for instance.
Yeah, the big challenge now for Amsterdam and Salzburg and Barcelona and Florence and Rome is how do you not have people throwing things at you because they've got too many tourists, and it's just becoming a problem. In Scandinavia, it's just not a problem. In fact, I always say the best time to travel in Scandinavia is peak season. You want people there because then there's an excuse to keep the parks open and lots of vibrancy and so on. So I want peak of peak. July and August is the very best time. Hey, I want to take just a moment to thank Ben, who's standing by, and Gabe, who's behind the scenes, making sure your questions are answered and so on. And Julianne, who helps us out on our Monday night travel crew. I want to thank Paul for joining us. It is 3:00 in the morning. And if he's a good Norwegian, he's been out all day long celebrating his 4th of July, and he's still with us. And if you want to learn more about Paul's work, his YouTube channel, he's been working really hard on that lately. It's very easy to find. It's Norway with Paul. And the Norwegian way to spell Paul is P-A-L. Also, I want to remind you, all these bits we're seeing are little clips out of half-hour programs. You can see all of our programs in their entirety very easily if you just go to our website and go to the TV sections. Everything's there and everything's for free. And we do want to remind you, in a couple of minutes, Ben is going to be organizing your questions and asking them to Paul and me, mostly to Paul. And so we're looking forward to your questions. So get down in that widget there and ask some questions. I do want to thank Scandinavian Specialties. It's a little restaurant in Seattle with Bjorn and his gang. They do a great job. And you've got a great restaurant in your town that does Scandinavian food. Let's keep our restaurants in our consuming pattern here, because our restaurants are struggling, just like our favorite tour companies are struggling. We got to get through this pandemic and still be standing when everybody can get back to normalcy. And now let's continue our look at Norway, looking at its remote farmsteads and its stave churches.
Scenery is everywhere you look. The history is harder to see. For most of its past, Norway was extremely humble. While wealthier parts of Europe were building grand churches and castles of stone, most of Norway's architecture was made of wood. Fires were almost routine, and little survives from centuries past.
This is the wet and wild homeland of the Vikings, whose culture lasted about 3 centuries, from roughly 800 to 1100. Setting sail from here in their tough boats, they settled Iceland, Greenland, and even made it to America. And Viking raiders terrorized much of Europe for generations.
This mound marks the grave of one of those Viking rulers. Like the Egyptians, the Vikings believed in a life after death. And they believed you could take it with you. That's why when graves are excavated, archaeologists find everything from jewelry and weapons to cooking pots and even boats.
The end of the Viking Age, with its pagan Norse gods, is marked by the coming of Christianity to Norway in the 12th century. Those medieval Norwegians, now tamed, took their boat-building skills, and rather than sleek ships to raid in, they built fine wooden churches to pray in.
These traditional Norwegian churches are called stave churches. While there were over 1,000 such churches in Norway back in the 1300s, today only a couple dozen survive. The Borgund stave church is one of the best. Stave churches were supported by stout pine poles, or staves, and slathered with a protective coat of black tar. Wood was plentiful and cheap. While the basic design reflects the simple technology of the age, more elaborate examples like this one stand as proud testaments to the culture. Remarkable carvings survive, evoking the pagan roots of these early Norwegian Christians. Stylized dragons, reminiscent of those that once adorned Viking ships, probably functioned like gargoyles to keep evil spirits at bay. This building has changed little since it was built in 1180. Interiors were stark and dark, with tiny windows and simple X-shaped crosses of St. Andrew. The architecture guides your gaze upwards towards heaven. The people who filled these churches often walked hours to worship. Many hiked from tiny hamlets formed by several farms joining together.
Oh man, Paul, we could talk all night, but I think we're going to make that our Norwegian trip, because I want to make sure that we have some time for our questions. And I want to thank you for being our tour guide tonight. And we are sort of crashing your Norwegian Independence Day party. And I think it would only be right, as we have all of our travelers tuning in right now, for us to sing the Norwegian national anthem. Would you be up for that?
Yeah, I'm up for that, for sure.
Okay, so we're going to sing this song, and I don't speak Norwegian and I don't understand the words, but I've got the music here, and we're going to go back and forth. And let's just have one more drink before we get in this, because I want to do a real good job.
We need that, yeah.
Skål.
Skål.
Oh yeah. Nice
Very
eye
good.
contact, but not creepy eye contact.
No. And thanks for having me on the show. It's really fun.
Oh, Paul, thank you. Okay, so all together, we've got all of our travelers now. They're going to be singing from their hearts out, and it's going to fill America with Norway's national anthem. What is the name of the song, first of all, and generally, what are we going to be singing about here?
So it's called Ja, vi elsker, or Ja, vi elsker dette landet, which means yes, we love this country. And it's a very poetic text about your love for nature and your father and mother and so on. Yeah.
Okay, and I'm going to do half of the lyrics on the first verse here, and Norwegians will know from inertia what I'm saying, and Americans don't know what we're singing anyway, so it doesn't matter a lot. But let's do our best here for the Norwegian national anthem to celebrate May 17 in the other hemisphere.
All right, so I'll count down to 4.
Okay, here we go.
1, 2,
No,
3.
do that. I'm sorry, do it in Norwegian.
In Norwegian, of course. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ja, vi elsker dette landet.
Som tre stiger frem.
Furet verbit over vannet.
Med de tusen hem.
Elsker, elsker det og tenker.
Pa, far og mor.
Og den saga natt som senker.
Drømmepar for jord.
Og den saga natt som senker, senker drømme på vår jord.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Hipp hurra, hipp hurra.
And you were smiling with Norwegian joy with my singing. It wasn't
It was fun. It was fun.
Very nice. Hey, Ben, we're ready for, I think, a few questions from all of our travelers tonight for Paul.
Oh, thank you. That was beautifully done. I'm glad we got that on recording, by the way.
He can blackmail us. All right.
Rick, how about a word from our sponsor before we get to some questions?
Well, thanks, Ben. And, I just want to remind people, we're 100 hardworking travelers here at Rick Steves Europe, you, me, and 98 others. And we've got 100 guides like Paul. I mean, Paul, we're all just having a great time with Paul. We could be in any country in Europe with our local guides that love their country as much as Paul loves his and are so expert at sharing it and celebrating it. And it's just my great joy of connecting Americans who are curious about the world with our guides who are so passionate and expert at sharing it. So we've had a little display here just of one country, and it's Norway, and it's Norway's constitution today, so we're celebrating it. But I'm particularly in a good mood right now because within a couple of weeks, we figure here at Rick Steves Europe, we're going to open the doors to signing up for our tours for 2022. And we're going to be starting a couple months early in February. And we've got about 15 or 20,000 people with their names on the list. I'm being very conservative because I don't want people to have the heartbreak of having to think they got a trip and then to cancel it. But things are looking good if we can all just get our vaccinations. Same with Europe. Europe is figuring it out too. We should be traveling by early 2022, and stay tuned because we've got some great travels ahead, and people can get all the latest when they go to the tour section at Rick Steves Europe. So that's my word from the sponsor. Now let's answer some questions.
Absolutely. And speaking of vaccinations, a few of our viewers are asking about the state of vaccinations in Norway and if it might be possible to travel there at least independently later this year. What do you think of the odds on that?
Well, we're following the same vaccination program as the European Union. So, it's going fairly slow. I think around 10% of the population here now is fully vaccinated, but we're receiving a lot of doses of Pfizer now in May, June, and July. So my guess, it's hard to predict, but I think by July and August, we're going to start seeing that they're going to lift a lot of the travel restrictions.
Hey, Paul, would you say it's fair to say Europe is off to a rocky start with no real cohesive top-down organization? It's every country figuring it out. But now you've stumbled, you've realized you got to get your act together, and now there's going to be a smarter collective movement forward for the importance of getting vaccinated.
Yeah.
I think so, because I think the United States lost a couple of months. I think Europe lost a couple of months. We're on the right path, but we've had a disappointing early spring, frankly. But I think things are going to look much better in the next couple of months. And most people are banking on the fact that there will be travel returning late this year and organized travel, bus tours like our program early next year.
I mean, we are only 5.2 million people, and we're going to receive 1 million doses of Pfizer now in May, in June, and July. And then you have other producers as well. And then for other countries in Europe with more people, they receive exponentially more doses. So it's gonna start speeding up a lot now, I think.
That's great.
We touched on oil production in Norway, and a few of our viewers were curious as to how that relates to the modernization of Norway. Does the government support electric cars? Is the government concerned about the production of oil going forward?
Mm-hmm. Well, they support electrical cars for sure. There's a lot of subsidies when you buy an electrical car. There's the toll is lower. You don't pay a road toll. There's free parking and so on. And actually, Norway is the country in the world with the most numbers of Teslas, only beaten by California, state of California. So they definitely support electrical vehicles here. When it comes to oil, we have 9 parties. Now we're not like the US where you have 2 parties. We have 9 parties, and they all have different opinions about the oil. Some parties, they want us to get rid of oil within 10, 15 years. And other parties, they want us to keep pumping the oil up as long as there is a demand, because they also feel that our oil is cleaner than many other oil resources.
Oh yeah,
around
there's
the
nothing
world.
as clean as Norwegian oil. Yes,
The way of extracting it, I guess, what they point to. There's a lower carbon emission by taking our oil up.
Well, for a little context, Norway does have this amazing blessing of the North Sea oil, right? You in Scotland, I guess. So yeah. Denmark doesn't have it. Sweden doesn't have it. Norway's got this amazing resource, which is really something that I guess you have to decide how big of a deal is that for you going forward, because it makes life easy. It's kind of like Texas or Alaska, that oil-rich places get that inside track economically. But I know the Tesla, like you said, one of the highest selling per capita places for Tesla is Norway. Tesla is not an expensive car in Norway. When you analyze all the benefits you get for buying a Tesla, it becomes not that much more expensive than any other car.
Yeah, but there is definitely a growing movement here for us producing less oil in the future. So it's kind of hard to say where that's going to end, but my prediction is that maybe within 40, 50 years, the production compared to what we have now is going to be just minimal. It's already declining. It peaked back in 2014.
But you've packed away a lot of money because of that. You've got
we have a huge sovereign wealth fund, one of the biggest in the world, which is invested into real estate and into the stock market. Norway owns 1% of all the shares in the world. So it's a crazy amounts of money. And, we can live off this money for generations.
Yeah, that standard of living is known to be quite high. And, that relates to some concern or some questions about the affordability of travel to Norway. Do you have any tips on affordability or budget travel in Norway?
Okay, before Paul answers that seriously, I want to remind you about the skinny wiener. Okay,
Yeah.
because if you want affordable travel, all you got to know is the word pulsa, right, Paul?
Yeah.
Pulsa, this is $5, and you got yourself a
Oh, yeah.
dinner. What's that?
Maybe even less, maybe in 4 sometimes, you know.
Or,
So-
I'll be happy to get it for $5, but I can dip this weenie into my mustard and then into these are the vegetables here, the onions, and then you take a bite.
Mm.
And nothing else matters. You can just have a great time. You can go to all those parks. You can make a
Yes.
friend with a Norwegian. They'll buy you a little bit of akavit, and it's a party.
It's very popular to do picnics in Norway. So if you travel in the summer, you know, you can just go to the supermarket, pick up some, you know, affordable items and go sit in a park or a bench or whatever. Or
You don't do
go
that
out
in
to the
France.
islands in Oslo or, yeah.
You don't do that in France because you can afford to sit down and get a nice salad in a restaurant.
Yeah.
But in Norway, even a relatively well-off person will go to the 7-Eleven, the corner convenience store, and get
Mhm.
something to go.
Yeah, it's very normal. It is. Yeah.
Very nice. I think we touched on the monarchy in Norway earlier. What role does a Norwegian monarchy play, if any, in society? And do they have any power or influence?
Basically not. It's more like a figurehead of state. The king used to have some more powers, but right now he's more as a symbol for the nation. He's a symbol of Norway, so more of a gathering point. In terms of his powers, he has some influential power, I guess you can say, because every Friday the government goes up to the royal palace where he will have to sign all the laws for them to pass. So, but he's never refused to sign any laws because he knows that that'll be the end of him, because he was never democratically elected, you know. But I'm sure as he's you know, a part of the political environment, you know, he has a certain influence, but he's basically stripped of his powers. Yeah.
But you know, us Americans have a hard time understanding a constitutional monarch, but our king and our prime minister and our everybody is the president. It would be more convenient if the president could just take care of business like a prime minister, and you had somebody who did the ceremonial stuff like a constitutional monarch. See, we don't have the constitutional monarch is the person that goes to the 4th of July celebration and cuts the ribbon or something. And the prime minister doesn't have to be sidetracked on that. But we have one person that has to carry both roles. And there's one reason right there for having a constitutional monarch. And that's one reason I think they survive in a modern age.
Yeah, I think a good thing about the king is that he has to be, well, at least on the outside, he needs to be politically neutral. So nobody knows where he stands, you know? So he's kind of on everyone's side. So
that's an artful thing. Does he do that well?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
All right, we have time for just one more question, and I don't think it was touched on, but we can hear it again if it was. Lisa is curious, very important question. What temperature should aquavit be served at?
That's a good one. That's a good one. So in Norway, aquavit is always served room temperature. Always. Yeah. In Denmark and Sweden, they often chill the aquavits. Yeah. But in Norway, it's always room temperature. When you go to a bar, for example, you see the bottles standing back on the shelf. They're not down in the fridge.
Hey, well, mine is room temperature. Yeah, sure, you betcha, man.
Brings out the flavor.
Tack för akavit.
Tusen tack. Skål.
Hey, well, Ben, thanks for those questions. I want to thank Pål Johansen. And Pål, you're just great. Thank you so much for being with us. And I want to wish you and all of our guide friends in Europe the best as we get through this COVID time. And I hope people, your YouTube's name is Norway with Pål, or what?
Yeah, Norway with Pål.
So that's easy. If you want to travel around Norway with Pål, do that. I want to remind you, next week, we're going to Iran. It's just a natural sequence from Norway. We're going to Iran. The show is called Won't you be my neighbor? And we're going to be talking about Iran, and it's a very complicated issue, very important issue. Hope you can join us for that. It'll be a beautiful evening. And then the week after that, 2 weeks from tonight, we've got a special show on the eccentric art of Europe. There's a lot of eccentric art, and we'll celebrate that. Every Monday, we're getting together. We're enthusing about European travel. We're getting together and scratching our travel bug bites. Today, it's been Norway. And Paul, we couldn't have done it without you. I'm so thankful that you've got your goat cheese cutter there. Oh, baby, that is so nice. And we've got our akavit. So I want to say tusen takk to Paul.
Tusen takk for having me here.
Yeah. Let's do it again next Syttende Mai. And we want to wish you, everybody, happy travels, even if we're just staying home for a little while.